Upon looking at the database, he also recommended that the database be revamped. So to answer basically everything that was introduced here, number 4, everything needs to be redone for the department. They need to have a better reporting tool. They need to have better data. They need to be able to link it with the city's current financial system. They need to have staff trained on how to report this information. And also, we need to develop standard forms for neighborhood councils to process a demand warrant. I have one here that the department provided when they need a demand warrant. I don't think it should be this complicated. I think they should just be able to revise it to say what it's for, how much, the vendor's number, the BRTC number, and give it to the department. I think that the treasurer's manual has a clear guideline of what is an authorized expenditure and what is not, and I don't think the department should be responsible for neighborhood councils that cannot fill this out correctly. And right now, the department invests a lot of time in cleaning up neighborhood councils' mistakes or omissions from this document. So if my recommendation would be to give us some time to work on finding out from the department what they need for this database to be built, to link it to the current city system, to develop some standard forms and report back with our recommendations and the new database and how it's working with the department in the future. I anticipate that that would take at least 3 months to build and talking with ITA.
Let me ask you this, is that from your comments?
Pardon me, Mr. Chair. We need to stop the tape so that we can flip it. We've approached an hour.
We don't have any 18-minute gap.
Yeah.
None of us is named Rosemary.
What?
I said none of us is named Rosemary Woods, so you're safe there.
Did you call my name?
All
Delilah?
I just have to say one thing, that Delilah's an ex-Marine. She knows how to fix bayonets and jump into foxholes, so she took it right to the heart.
Former Marine. There are no ex-Marines.
Let me just ask what you recommended, starting from base and building the database. How is it the neighborhood councils can actually access that? Are you just fixing something for the department?
For right now, when I took a visit to the department, they have a tedious and very paper-intense process to process one request. They make a copy of a complete packet, which from what they told me, the minimum pages is 10 pages. Someone inputs it into the current database. That person walks it over to the neighborhood empowerment analyst. The neighborhood empowerment analyst looks at it, approves it. They walk it over to the accounting section. The accounting section approves it, who walks it over to the clerks, who the clerks can then give back to the accounting section. It's just too much. And in that mix, sometimes they lose paperwork. Sometimes they put the wrong neighborhood council account, and they don't realize it until the NC calls them and says, wrong neighborhood council. That should not be taking place right now. But it appears that over the years, a systems analyst or someone gets an idea and they change the database. They change the database. They change it. So there's no checks and balances where if the neighborhood empowerment analyst loses it and it comes to the accounting section, they have no way to know what's missing or what's incorrect or what's wrong. And I'm hoping that we can work with ITA and develop a database that the department defines the criteria of what they need, check number, invoice number, date release, and then we could come back and report it. The database I picture is something that should provide a report that I ask for with the FSR. What's the current NC balance and how much have they spent? It should be able to provide each council member with the NC balances in their area. It should be able to provide the city council over the past 5 years, show me what this neighborhood council has spent it on and for what category and for who. And that doesn't exist right now.
Okay, now with that, does that include the last meeting we had about the electronic platform? Is that what we're heading towards?
The electronic platform, I believe I mentioned in another meeting, I don't think would resolve the issues. A few months ago, I mentioned that there's a lot of internal procedures and policies that need to be fixed. I don't think that's going to resolve the issues. Now, we could meet with the department and develop an existing database that would work, but I don't think the a platform was the best solution. You know, we're purchasing basically a vendor, a very good vendor, well, if we went through the RFP process, for something so small and minor that a CAO analyst could fix. You know, you want to spend $180,000 on something that is not going to fix the problem of staff. And I did make a suggestion to the general manager that if she feels that they need this e-platform, tell me why and tell me what we're going to get from it. But if she feels that staff is the best solution, tell me what we're going to get for that. And that's part of this process and working with Dunn and IT and the CLA is to see how we could better improve this funding program for the department and NCs and for the budget process.
Is it sent to as the general manager? Is there a sense from looking at I know you've had a major cut in personnel, but do you have the right resources as far as the type of positions and the number of positions to address this financial issue that's currently in the department?
That's a good question. And, before I answer, I do want to give much thanks to Paul Smith and Daryl Powell from the CLA's office, and Terry Sauer and Delilah Puche from the CAO's office, because they've really gone above and beyond, I think, what they needed to do in terms of assisting the department. And I know that I am very appreciative, and my staff are also very appreciative of their efforts these past weeks. So, Delilah brings up a really good point. Do we need like the whole shebang of a high-tech electronic platform if what we really do need is just a really solid database with actually maybe perhaps one or two more accountants that will help us with check cutting and processing those demand warrants that do come in. And, we are looking at trying to do a restructure within the department to see what exactly we need in terms of positions that would make this funding program successful. And, currently we have one person who cuts checks, who was designated, brought on to cut checks, and then another, basically she's just a clerk that has been moved into cutting checks too. So she's kind of a hybrid. She's like 1 foot in her actual job and 1 foot doing check cutting because we can't keep up. So there are some resource issues that need to be looked into, and I think that with the CLA and CAO's help, and as well as the controller, who I do have a meeting with them next week, we will try to get this cleared up with hopefully within the next couple of weeks, and perhaps be able to bring back to you at the next meeting a more accurate reflection of what we need.
Delilah, let me ask you that as you walk through this for the next couple of months to get this done, where do you foresee the actual NDCs plugging in? Is this phase 2 that they then once the forms are created and the system, the database, how do they get tied into it to where we do not have Dunn doing their work? They have the ability to do some of this electronically so that we're not passing as much paper and things of that nature.
Councilmember, I believe that at some point we are going to have policies in place that basically direct the department or give them the authority that if a neighborhood council does not complete a form or a demand warrant, they have the authority to either turn off funding, kick the demand warrants back. Because where the problem comes in is that come May 15th, the department receives boxes of hundreds of demand warrants that NCs are holding on to through the end of the year that they have a hard time processing, and that can offset budget projections, because as you know, we prepare the budget January, February, March. So we're going to have to, in working with this, we're going to have to develop policies, forms, and also consequences as to what we're going to do if a neighborhood council does not submit forms correctly, or if the department makes a mistake, what we can do to resolve it. So that way we can prevent supplemental actions that take place that change NC numbers or account balances and that do not hold the department responsible. It could be a council action or something in committee.
No, they don't have that authority now? They couldn't impose that and say, here's the forms, these are the only forms to use for these allocations?
I believe they can set standard templates, but I don't think the department could prevent a council motion being introduced to carry forward funds because the NC did not correctly fill out paperwork. And that has occurred and is occurring where the department is getting overridden for certain requests.
But I think we talked about that the other day, that if those motions came to this committee, they would then be looked at in light of Dunn's responsibility and what was directed. They just cannot go to finance and get waived out, because from what I understand about it is once the budget is set, then it's generally the policy committees are managing or overseeing it. It's not going back to budget and finance and saying, can I spend what you already gave me?
That would help
Yeah.
if that's how it happens from this point on.
Well, could we get with VOC and when they,
Yeah, I think what's happened here is the NCs had two pots of encumbrances. One was for the outreach that you were talking, Councilman Zion was talking about, our outreach budget for the elections. And then the other one was the encumbrances that the department placed on those unprocessed demand warrants. So why they thought they have this money for an encumbrance, maybe between the two of a couple $1,000s or maybe $10,000, they went to the council office to get the money. Why they went to the council office? Because they probably couldn't get it processed through Dunn. And they think they had this money that was encumbered, they should have it, and they try to access it and they can't. So they go to the council office writes a motion and asks Dunn to take that amount out of the general appropriation. So
I think
it's a bad process to begin with.
I think it's compounding a bad process, but I think we have to figure out when motions are made where they should go. Because if people are just sending them through and finance is waiving them and they're moving money around, I don't think that's the way the system works. I think it's...
We agree with you there.
So we need to figure out how to do that.
But on the encumbrances, the general manager has told us that if a package comes for a demand warrant and that package isn't complete, they are now going to immediately send it back to them and tell them that it's not complete. You have to file a complete package for us to review it.
I did send that out in a newsletter last week on Friday. So as of yesterday, we have we're sending back any incomplete demand warrants, as well as any of the ones that were incomplete that we've been holding on to, trying to get information from either the treasurer or the vendor. We are also sending those back.
So you said, was that a newsletter?
Correct. So then when we are trying to put together or update our existing funding manual to have all the rules and regulations there as well, that needs to be updated.
Did you send that newsletter to each council office?
The newsletter goes out to approximately, I think, 5,000 people, and I think that some council offices are on it, but you have to select to be on it. I can add you to our newsletter if you're not.
You can't do what now?
I said I'd be happy to add you to our newsletter if you're not receiving it.
Because I think what would be helpful is if we send it to the council offices, they're aware of the direction you're going in. That may help them make good decisions when people ask them to do something that's contrary to your direction. But
yeah. And my understanding of the two motions that have gone before City Council that were approved, where neighbor councils received their funds back, in those two cases specifically, each of the neighbor councils, either because they couldn't get quorum or they had some other operational issues, were not able to meet our final deadlines, and so they requested that their council members step in.
And Councilmember, also, if I could add, if you would like us to report back on a complete development of the funding program, there are also some things that we should consider, such as the encumbrance policy. Right now, there is no existing encumbrance policy. There is no guidelines. NCs do not encumber funds. The departments encumber on behalf of NCs for what they anticipate to be spent. And also for P-card purchases, previously there was a $1,000 P-card limit last year. when we were eliminating the rollover policy, the general manager increased that amount to $2,500. In my meeting last week with the department, they indicated that normal P card purchases are roughly between $100 and $500. Unless they want to go above the limit, they could call the department. I think when we report back, we're going to have to come up with recommendations or instructions to offset illegal P card purchases that we can't keep track and cannot identify the vendor it belongs to, consequences for not providing receipts, and additionally reviewing the limit to possibly even $500 or something lower than that. I think we should also report back. Phase one, I think, is the initial phase, because when you build a system or funding program, I think everyone's going to want an idea or something to add on, and we could do that. And we could report back with what we've done, what we recommend as far as the limits. I believe that should be the phase one, and then phase two would actually be rolling it out. I imagine this is going to take several months to do. It's also going to require assistance from the controller and IT, and very extensively from the department. So that's my recommendation to resolve these issues, just a thorough exam. There might be some things we're missing. We were short on time in the meeting we had with the department last week, so we probably didn't even dive into the nitty-gritty of P card purchases or auto deducts that I wanted to really dive into.
Yeah. The first step in all this is really to get the Dunn house in order. And then once we have what Delata was talking about, a really operational database and a set of instructions with it, then we can look at what you want as how that window opened up into the NCs, so they have a better, more transparent look into their finances.
Okay. So if that's phase one, you're going to give us the analysis. Phase two would be the implementation of what you're proposing. And then we also would be getting information from the general manager about her staffing and if the positions are the right classification and things of that nature. And then you mentioned the controller and the city clerk. Now, how do you bring them in as it relates to their activities on phase one?
Well, I already met with ITA last week with the assistant general manager, and she told me that they will fully support the development of the database. So basically, if I meet with the department and establish guidelines, they'll be able to help design something for them as an initial start. And the controller, we might have to work with them when it comes to certain auditing of current funds. They have not reported last year's encumbrances, and this year's encumbrances, we need to just have some checks and balances. So we're going to need their assistance with that as well.
Okay. And so the issue with the overall, if this database works as you perceive it, it should ultimately cut down work down the road for the controller and the city clerk.
Yes, the idea is for it to become more efficient for the department, and I have a pretty good idea it will. It's just going to take time, training for the new or the employees to learn the database, and the department to be able to communicate with us on what they need, what they're missing. They have an existing database that was slow. It had 2 errors on it. We already resolved 1 error, so I believe it shouldn't be as slow anymore. They could continue to use that database in the meantime until we've worked on this new database. So it shouldn't stop them operational-wise.
Yeah. I think our observation is also that the staff there is more than willing to work hard and to do what's necessary to process these things. But some of their internals are just so chaotic that if we work on that first, get the processes in-house straightened out, then we begin to move outwards into the other communities.
And also just the database is definitely something that's internal for the department. We are still working on how to provide neighbor council with the ability to submit online demand warrants, which would also cut down on paper. We are exploring that. I am trying to pilot a program within probably the next month to test this, but I do need to speak with the controller's office as to can we start accepting scanned receipts in lieu of original receipts for the initial submission, and perhaps that would actually assist us greatly as well.
Some of the problems, I think you mentioned, is they're going to want inked, documents. They can do scanned documents or electronic documents as opposed to paper originals. That would be more
That's the
efficient.
same system the banks are using.
Pardon me?
That's the same system the banks are using.
Yeah.
Correct, yeah. That's right.
They take your money all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Councilmember, the database also might resolve some of the other issues that we've been working with as far as the NC emails. It's all together as far as Google Docs. I believe the general manager was looking into the free Google Docs tool when each NC has their email account or domain that we plan to create, which might resolve some of the issues that we were hoping to get from this e-platform. It can now be free on Google Docs.
Okay.
And we actually had a meeting with ITA, and ITA did say it is possible to own an email account and have the security requirements for Google Docs. So I'm assuming all of that should be in one report because it relates with each other.
Because that's something we asked for a while back, is to have an email process. And did they have any word on where they are on helping update the web pages and whether?
They did. She indicated that it was a 9-month waiting list, and it still was a 9-month waiting list because there were other priorities from the mayor's office. But the general manager, she she looked into resolving the email address for each neighborhood council. She actually developed a solution for that in purchasing domains for Empower LA and possibly creating one for each neighborhood council. What we are looking at now is a simpler way to log on through the website and just some small issues to see if we can resolve, the Google Plus being one. What was the other one? We were going to look into owning it?
Oh, yes.
Or distribution, I think.
Distribution, right.
Basically how each NC would receive an email, and we're going to have all those details on that report back that I was believed supposed to come back here. But it relates to the e-platform, so I just want to make sure that we have everything together.
Now, when we talked before with the prior general manager on the web page and some of the neighborhood councils, what they expressed a concern about was whether they could get some access to update their own material, and it didn't all have to go through Dunn, such as, because the complaint was that if they had changes in officers and things like that, those are all the things that backed up because Dunn didn't have time to correct. But if they had the ability to go in and make those changes, and we've also discussed that I could understand people not wanting their personal email on the system, but there should be no reluctance to have the city-issued email on the system.
I believe, and she could speak more of it, but I believe our solution was to provide them all with a city email with the Empower LA domain. The department has already purchased 100 domains with empowerla.org. They would not be able to have lacity.org domains because you need remote access to access it from outside of the city department. So they will have an empowerla.org email address. And when you send an email to that domain, it would go to the board members that were registered to that account.
And you could also, I'm not sure the technology, but include the collaboration efforts from Google Docs would be part of that system. So there could be this exchange of documentation.
And also in regards to the board rosters, that there was a concern that we don't have updated board rosters. Actually, part of with the elections, we are completely updating our rosters. I would like to tie the update of rosters to the funding program in terms of, any time you change any changes in the board that's reported to us, within 10 days, just so that we can maintain accurate rasters. If a neighborhood council had the ability to make those changes on the website themselves, then we would not know that would happen. And as in the past, we've had issues like we've mentioned before, where when we gave them that ability, they did take out other fields of information that we had put in there.
And when you get the individual emails, when you get a change in board members, that will get updated automatically, that a new board member would go on the email system and know when it's taken out?
Correct. But we would have, again, this is a system that we have to put into place within the department. And that also involves in terms of staffing, like who has the ability to do this. That's why we're looking at the restructure. There's a lot of upfront cleanup work that just needs to be done, and I'm hoping by December we will be in a completely different place where I can come back to you and say that, okay, all the rosters are updated, all the fund, we know exactly how much funding everybody has, and, we have a transparent system in place, not only for the neighborhood councils, but for the department as well. There's work that has to be, a lot of cleanup work right now.
The final question I have is that on the current system or the proposed new system, does the web page also act as a repository to tell the world how the money's being spent?
I imagine that the funding program database could produce a report for each neighborhood council, which the department could post online. It's something they would continually have to update monthly or however they do that, but it should produce a simple report and you just PDF it and post it.
And
Is this, Paul, we talked about it before, is the system Delilah's talking about similar to the GCP system where you got a brief explanation of what's occurring, you put the dollar amount, it goes out?
We actually talked about a little bit about some of the modeling after the GCP. I don't think it is right now, but we could continue those discussions, find out how we could do that.
All right. But I just asked if we can come back in 2 months. You said 3, I'm going to cut it to 2. Just as a briefing to tell us where you are, and that we can get an update on the system and also the issues of what the department is doing on webpage, emails, transparency, and all that. And again, what I'm interested in is if you find in this hodgepodge of stuff really conflicts or things that are creating significant errors, that we've come up with solutions to how to fix that as part of the system, because I'd hate to put something in play and find out the first 4 steps work, but we forgot about 8, 9, and 10. So we want a very smooth, simplistic system that is easily accessible and that people can read, and then it's a matter of how it's implemented and imposed on people to say, this is the system, this is how you get paid. If you don't follow this system, you don't get paid. Those are the kind of things I think gets people's attention.
Just one other thing. The department did prepare and continues to update this treasurer's handbook. This got, a lot of really good information. It goes from nuts and bolts all the way from the ethics of financial conflict to how to process a demand warrant. There's a lot of good information in here. It's a document that should probably be updated, but the department's done a lot of work to disseminate information. Sometimes it's just not,
It's only one limitation. You've got to require people to read it.
I read it.
Oh, okay.
I like the question to answer them quick.
Yeah. So if we get to that, and we'll set it back for 2 months, and then come back and have a verbal briefing on it. Okay. Anything else? That's all. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Adjourned.